topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, and I am thrilled to be here. So, folks, I'd like to take a moment and thank each and every one of you that have got my book, because I'm super excited to share that after 32 months straight, my book is a bestseller. And actually, I was checking the UK marketplace yesterday, and it was in top 10. And I was checking Canadian marketplace, and this book was within like top 5. And of course, it's a bestseller in US too. So thank you for keeping our book in the top position, and also helping us take the profits, partial profits, and helping women entrepreneurs all across the globe. And one more request as always, if you have not started doing it, I invite you and highly encourage you to take 1 hour of your time and give it every month, just 1 hour every month, and give it to somebody, helping them with no strings attached. So that said, let's bring our guest on. Welcome, Portia.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me, and congratulations on your book.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So Portia is a lawyer, and we will be getting into all the nitty-gritties that can help you as an entrepreneur. Before we get started, I'd love to hear, Portia, if you recall any moment from your childhood that still stands out today for you.
Gosh, there were so many. One of the things that really stands out is we used to do summers with my paternal grandmother, and she was the publisher and editor-in-chief of the Afro-American newspaper. And so every summer as a child, we would go to the paper and work on the paper. And it's a part of our family legacy, and that really helped to instill the importance of hard work, but also the importance of family and telling our stories and making sure that we're helping to educate the people around us. And that's really stuck with me and carried through all the way to the work that I do now.
Newspaper. Now that is really something very different than most children experience. So what was it like?
Well, growing up in a newspaper family, there was always something happening. I've got to tell you that. And, there was a big emphasis on writing and making sure that things were accurate. It was a beautiful place to sort of grow up as a child, to have the opportunity to be a part of something that's 130 years old this year, and to be a part of that legacy, 5th generation. And my son is now 6th generation of that family paper that's still owned and operated by our family all these years later. So what was it like? It was incredible to be able to be a part of that.
Oh, that's phenomenal. And can you share with us the name of paper?
Sure. It's the Afro-American newspaper. It's based out of Baltimore, Maryland. And like I said, it's 130 years old this year. So it's pretty impressive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
what a great legacy to have, 5 generations and then your son also joining in. Now that's phenomenal. What a way to go.
It's a pretty interesting story. So, my great grandfather, well, let me go back. My great grandfather was born as an enslaved person in Montgomery County, Maryland, to his biological father being the enslaver. And it's sort of this combination between newspaper legacy and estate planning, because when the enslaver passed away, he left my great grandfather and grandmother and their children in an estate plan to his nieces. And so they were actually inherited as a part of an estate plan. Subsequently, he was able to buy his own freedom and the freedom of his wife and children. And then the land that they tilled, all 660 acres in Montgomery County, when he died, he created a rudimentary estate plan and said, I'm passing this land to my children in equal quarters. And if they want to sell, they've got to sell it to their siblings first. And my great grandmother decided to sell her portion to her brother and took that money and gave it to her husband, who then founded the Afro-American newspaper, which is now, as I mentioned, 130 years old. So it's this great sort of combination of news and reporting and information, as well as estate planning, that really goes full circle for me. So I like it.
Oh gosh, I am sure it is more like a historic landmark now.
It is. It is. And it's one of the last vestiges of the old Black press. So my younger sister is actually the executive director of Afro Charities and has been doing a lot of work in the archives there, which is just incredible block of history. So I'm excited to see what she does and how she brings that to the front.
I'm sure she will be phenomenal in her venture, because having a family and having a legacy and standing on giants of your parents and grandparents and great grandparents who had such a great vision, it's such a gift in itself. So as you grew up, and did you have any inclinations going towards journalism?
I did, actually. It's very surprising. So in college, I was a journalism major. I was actually specializing in public relations. And the law was the furthest thing from my mind at that point in time. I was like, I'm going to be a publicist. I'm going to be on the red carpet. I'm going to tell stories in the media. It's going to be great. And one summer, I had just gotten this internship at a big PR company in New York. And as the universe would have it, the same day that I got offered the internship, a drunk driver rear-ended me. And I ended up in physical therapy for the entire summer. I obviously could not move to New York on my own. And it really opened my eyes, because, when we're young, we think we're invincible. But it opened my eyes to just how quickly life can change, right? We all make plans, and then something comes up, and now we've got to make new plans. And I happen to have a cousin who owned a law firm in Baltimore, and they do civil rights work. And I interviewed with them and got an internship for the summer there at the law firm in Maryland. And they were working on a police brutality case that subsequently went to trial while I was working with them. And it really highlighted for me the power of the law, and just how important it is to have a keen understanding and have people who can be voices for the voiceless, people who will fight on behalf of those that other people maybe overlook or don't necessarily take on being that person. And so my whole trajectory changed after that. And it's such a pivotal moment for me, because I can see it so clearly. But I started taking legal classes. I took the LSAT, and a couple of years later, I was in law school, and here we are.
So as you were going through law school, so definitely it's amazing how one internship can ignite the passion for a different career and for a different career trajectory that you chose. So as you were going through law school, what was it like?
Law school is a wonderful journey. It is definitely a challenge, particularly in the first year. They have a saying, in the first year they work you to death, and the second, first year they scare you to death, second year they work you to death, third year they bore you to death, right? They have this saying in law school. I actually really loved my time in law school. I made lifelong friends. I was vice president of my class first and second year, and then I was president of my class my third year. And it was a beautiful experience because it was so eye-opening. There were so many things that I thought I knew that I really didn't know very well. And law school taught me a whole different way of thinking, taught me how we got to this point, not just that we're here, but how we got there, what the legal arguments were that got us there, particularly in constitutional law, which is very relevant right now today. And it really changed my perspective on the world. So I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think you have to love it. It's a hard place to go if you don't love it. But I really enjoyed it.
And as you got out of law school, how did you decide that you wanted to go on real estate area?
So I didn't, right? It's one of those moments that sort of just came. When I came out of law school, or while I was in law school, I worked and interned in the public defender's office in Maryland. And during that time, the state's attorney's office was going through a shift, and they were looking for other people to come in. And so the state's attorney's office, contacted me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in being an intern in the state's attorney's office?" And I said, "Okay, well, sure, happy to do that." And then I was a state's attorney, sworn in as a state's attorney just after passing the bar. And then from there, I was working as a prosecutor in Baltimore City, which is a high volume jurisdiction. And, I kept seeing these social issues happen. Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, they just kept happening, and I couldn't sit on the sidelines. And so I found myself in Ferguson protesting. I found myself in New York protesting. I found myself in DC, and more thinking there has to be a different way to handle these things, and getting more involved in activism. And one of the areas that I realized most people weren't talking about was really this area of intergenerational wealth. We talk a lot about wage disparities and the reforming the justice system and all of these different areas in which there are problems. And nobody was really talking about, how do we keep what we already have? How do we keep what we have and leverage it? And the more I researched into why wealth wasn't making it intergenerationally in historically and systematically marginalized communities, the more I was surprised that this was not sounding the alarm on every news station. So that's sort of how I transitioned into this, was based really on need and a necessity that I saw as a whole in the marketplace.
No, you definitely bring up some very valid points here. So I want us to kind of like regroup on generational wealth planning. So what happens is, people finish their high school, some will go to college, some will not go, and then they get into job, and they get so caught up in day-to-day conundrum that they don't even think about wealth planning and forget about the retirement. It's just moving through day-to-day struggles and getting over obstacles. So explain to our audience, what is generational wealth planning and why is it a necessity to think about?
Absolutely. So I like to redefine the term wealth, right? For most people, they hear the term wealth and they think Elon Musk, or they think Jeff Bezos, right? They're these incredibly and fabulously wealthy people in our society. And they go, I don't have that, so I don't need to plan for anything, right? I have this one house, or I have, this small retirement account. I don't have anything like that, so I don't need to plan. And I like to encourage people to think about wealth differently. Wealth is access. It is opportunity. It is a safe place to live. It is the ability to utilize what the previous generation has built to keep moving your family forward. It doesn't mean that you have billions and trillions of dollars. It doesn't mean that you even maybe have millions of dollars. So let's say you have that one house, and that one house can make it to the next generation without court interference, without probate, without percentages being taken out for attorneys and judges and real estate agents, etc. And that money gets to stay with your family. Well, what's the impact of that? Well, that one house, no matter where it is in the country, let's assume it's worth $100,000, right? Well, that $100,000 house, someone can rent that house, which means your family member has a stream of income. And your family member could then refinance that house, right? And take money out to pay for college, to pay for another house, to start a business. That's wealth. That is the ability to take one thing and leverage it into something else. And as long as it's intact, then your family can use it. But if it's lost at the death, which is what's happening now, is most people are losing a majority of their earned wealth at the generation transfer. Every time somebody either gets sick or passes away, what they've built is being eroded because they don't have a proper plan in place to keep it intact for their families. So when we think about generational wealth planning, we're thinking about, how do I secure my legacy and me while I'm alive, right? But also, when the inevitable comes and I'm no longer here, how do the people I leave behind that I love continue to be supported? How do I make sure what I've built stays with the people that I care about versus all of this redistribution? And so why should we care? Because I'm pretty sure none of us go to work every day to pay a judge, right? to see a judge come through, and to be fair, it's not the judges that get paid, but to see money be eroded through a court process, to see attorneys reaping their fees, or to see probate referees, people who come out to evaluate properties, or creditors, or on and on and on, right? And so when we think about it, what do we get up for every day? What is our personal and family why? What is the legacy we want to leave behind? That's all generational wealth planning. So it's not just money.
Well, I'm sure you've probably guessed my next question. You talked about losses upon a loved one's death. So can you give us the gravity of the situation as to how much and how far those losses can go?
Well, right now across the country, approximately $2 billion is lost annually in the probate process. And the court process is actually entirely avoidable almost in every single state with a comprehensive and proper estate plan for your asset levels, your family structure, and for your goals. And so that's $2 billion that is being redistributed from American families to other places, like I mentioned, to court fees, attorneys' fees, personal representative fees, et cetera. And we can stop that bleed. Particularly in the African American community, there was a study that was done in 2017 that said that only 13% of college educated African Americans get $10,000 to the next generation, $10,000 or more. And if we say that differently, 87% of college educated African Americans are not even getting $10,000 to the next generation. And that is not because we don't have things. In fact, there is more wealth now in the Black community than there has ever been in the history of this country to be able to be passed. And 70% or more of the African American community do not have any estate planning at all, let alone the correct estate plan for their families. They don't have any estate planning at all. And so we're slated to lose the majority of the earned wealth that has come in. So when we think about the gravity, what does that mean? Well, if you have one home in your family that I mentioned has the ability to perpetuate wealth intergenerationally, and you lose it because a court or a judge is going to sell that property to satisfy debts, then you don't have the asset anymore, and you can't buy back what you've just lost. But if you passed that asset outside of the court structure, then you have some decisions on how you might pay those debts differently. And it's really just about minor tweaks that have a very big impact on how those assets can be used in the future. The first part, though, is reframing our minds.
Yeah, no, that is definitely surprising and eye-opening. So what you're saying is that estate planning is basically for everyone, because a lot of people drop wills and they think, we have taken care of our children or of our next generation, or even if it is parents, or God forbid, I wish well to each and every one, but God forbid, if any untold event happens, and on the event, in the event of someone's death, people can lose out so much. So is my understanding correct that each and every one of us needs to have that estate planning?
Yes, absolutely. Everybody over the age of 18 needs some form of estate planning. The reality is, we just don't all need the same estate plan, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
an 18-year-old me did not own a home, right? 18-year-old me did not have a whole bunch of money in my retirement account. And 18-year-old me did not have a 4-year-old at home, right? And so 18-year-old me's estate plan is very different. It's going to be your property power of attorney, right? Should you get into a car accident or, COVID-19, where you wind up in the hospital, someone's got to have legal authority to access your bank accounts. Someone has to have legal authority to take care of you, to sign your name, etc., if you aren't able to do it. And so your property power of attorney, or depending on what state you're in, uniform statutory or durable power of attorney, it does vary by state. But that first piece is going to be number one. Number two is going to be your healthcare documents, right? Who gets to make your medical decisions, and what decisions do you want them to make? Those two things, those first two things of the three that you need, have nothing to do with how much money you have, and have everything to do with how old you are, right? Once you are a legal adult, you have to designate those people. And if you do not, the only entity that can designate them is the court. People wrongfully believe that their spouse or their parents are automatically their first fiduciaries. And the reality is, once you're an adult, you don't have any automatic fiduciaries. There is no one who is automatically going to step up and handle your adulting for you. It's just not how it works. And so either we designate the people that we want for ourselves, or we put the court in a position to designate for us. Much like, I'm sure people have seen Britney Spears. She had a very public mental health breakdown years ago, and the courts appointed her father as her conservator. He makes all legal decisions for her, medical decisions, etc. He controls how she works, whether or not she could get married. And she had a very public battle to regain some control over her life. And if she had designated in a power of attorney who would be the people to manage this in the event she was unable to do it for herself, then her father wouldn't necessarily have been in that position, right? Unless she had designated him.
Right.
The third piece is your distribution plan. And this is the one that everybody thinks is estate planning, right? Wills, trusts, etc., what happens after you die, but it's really just one component. The distribution plan is going to depend. It's going to depend on your family structure. Are you married? Are you single? Do you have minor kids? Do you have adult kids? Do you have special needs beneficiaries? Do you have beneficiaries who have been incarcerated? On and on and on, right? What is your family structure, and who are those people in your family? Number two is, what is your asset levels? Right? What do you own? Do you have a home? Do you have 10 homes? Do you have a multi-billion-dollar corporation, international corporation? Do you have a mom and pop shop, or are you a 9-to-5 employee? All of those pieces are going to impact, what your planning looks like. And then the third piece is really going to be, what are your goals? What is it you are trying to achieve? Because while you might have less than the person next to you, right, from a financial standpoint, maybe your goal is to ensure that one house is always available for your family, and you don't want them to sell it. So you put restrictions on sale, and you might be more conservative or restrictive in your planning because you're trying to achieve a certain goal. And so all of those pieces are going to come in. For the majority of Americans, a will is not enough. A will actually still has to be certified by a judge, so it doesn't avoid that court interference that we talked about. It doesn't avoid those fees. And so for most people, while they do a will and they think, oh yay, I've done estate planning, they likely haven't done enough for their family structure, their asset levels, and their goals. And unfortunately, because there are not more programs like this one where we talk about this, most people don't even know how unprotected that they really are.
So you've talked about a few different pieces, and you also talk about that there are 6 pieces to creating an estate plan. Have we included some, or are there any more remaining?
Yeah, so when we think about the six pieces, right, it's going to be your property power of attorney is number one. Your healthcare documents actually break down into three different documents. It's going to be your healthcare power of attorney. It would be your advanced healthcare directive. So saying what you want to have happen in advance. Do you want to be on a ventilator? Would you like to be left in a vegetative state, or would you want someone to remove the artificial feeding as well as oxygen from you? And at what point would you want them to do that? And then the last one is really going to be your HIPAA authorization form of your medical documents, giving someone legal authority to review your medical records. Because we don't want to just pick an agent and then not let them be able to make informed decisions about our care. And then you're going to have, your will or trust, your distribution documents. Likely, if you have a trust-based plan, you also have a will. We typically call that a pour-over will, something that's a catch-all for your estate planning. And if you've got minor children, then we're also looking at guardianship planning. And that is really specific to people who have minor kids, because who will raise them if something happens to you, both temporarily and permanently, if you are not coming home. So those are really the components of your basic estate plan that everybody over the age of 18 should have.
So this is you're in law practice, you can just kind of like state check, 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 check for a common person like me. Let's say now, if you're in Maryland, then of course, Portia knows so much, you will connect with her. But for people who are living in different states, how can they go about to find an estate planning attorney who has your back? Because unfortunately, lawyers do have a bad rep.
Yeah. And, we have been compiling a list. We have referral partners all over the country that we work with and that we trust. And so if somebody is interested and they say, hey, I live in Michigan, can you refer an attorney to me? We can. We have people all over the country that we can make sure to place people with. The first part I'd say is reframing our mindset and gathering as much information as possible. In this arena, as in any arena, it's important to be your own advocate. And the best way to do that is to learn as much as you can. If you walk into a lawyer's office and you say, I want a will, then you're going to leave with a will, even if that's not necessarily what would have been best for you. And so I would say making sure that we are also educating ourselves is important. And anyone can reach out to us on our website. We do have a free resource library that people can click from the homepage. And it's got a lot of information about wills, trusts, estate planning, the different components. We even have a document on there how to vet an estate planning attorney, what questions to ask, to make sure that you're getting a complete understanding of what's happening and a continued relationship. Because estate planning is not a thing where you're one and done, right? Because your life changes. If you've got minor kids, eventually they're going to be adults, and hopefully you're there for that. And eventually, hopefully, maybe they'll get married or they'll have children of their own, etc. And so your estate plan is going to change, and you're not going to have the same assets that you had when you were 18, right? Hopefully those are going to grow and continue to get bigger. And so with all of that being said, that means your estate plan has to change. Your estate plan has to evolve. And so when we talk about what are the basics are the foundation. And as your life evolves, you can keep adding on building blocks and pieces on top of that sort of wealth plan to ensure that it's still serving your family and your goals. So you're going to want an attorney who can go the distance with you, who's going to keep in touch and understands your wishes and can work with you holistically to make sure you're on track.
I like what you said, that think about long term, and especially when you're playing that long game and when you have your goals, you're growing with your attorney and identifying that person who will go the distance with you. And one thing that stuck with me was that change your mindset. Think about getting started and getting educated and knowing what you want. So let's say if people get educated, and I'm sure there is still some places that people would not know everything. I mean, that's where the experts like you step in because you have been doing this day in and day out. So still, do you have, let's say you have given referrals, And yet sometimes, the person who may be good for somebody else may not be good for you. Do you have any tips where, like, for a common person like me, if they're going, like, what to look for? So now that's
Yeah.
one step forward, that yes, this person is coming as a referral, but what should one look for in an estate planner?
Someone who's asking you questions,
Mm,
right? You want someone who's going to ask you questions. You want them to dig a little bit deeper into your goals. If they're just doing sort of balance sheet estate planning, they're saying, here's how much money you have, so here's the estate plan we're going to give you, then likely you're not getting the full weight of what you could in estate plan, particularly if you're looking at intergenerational wealth transfer. If you're looking at protection and building intergenerational wealth, you want someone who's going to go one step further and say, okay, well, what are your goals? Where are we right now? Can we bring in your financial advisor? Oh, you don't have a financial advisor? Let's connect you with a financial advisor so we can make sure you're on track for retirement. And, we can make sure you're on track for incapacity. We can make sure that, you're going to have enough money for college for your kids, or you've got minor kids and you don't have life insurance. Okay, well, we've got to fix that hole, because that's a huge risk to your family and to your estate plan should something happen to you or the other parent. And so someone who's going to take the next step to really
mm,
look at what's going on inside of your family structure, because no two plans are the same. Right. And this is why estate planning is so specific and individualized, or at least should be treated like that, because my family is not the same as your family. And our needs are going to be different, which means I need someone who's going to sit down and understand what those differences are and what our individual goals are. Because we both may want intergenerational wealth transfer, but I have a 4-year-old. And so my concerns right now are going to be different than someone who has adult children, right? Because not only
absolutely.
do I need to think about, well, who's going to take care of this 4-year-old, but I also think about, how do I continue to instill my values? How do I continue to encourage and support him if I'm gone and the only thing that's left is my estate? And so, I can put things into my plan and have that if he graduates from college and I'm gone, graduates from high school in the top of his class and I'm gone, he gets a small little bit of money unrestricted to do whatever he wants with. And I've written a letter that encourages him to travel with that money, because I think it's an important part of a young person's education and understanding of where they fit in the world, right? But it's also my way of saying, I'm proud of you. If I'm not there to do it, the only thing that can is my estate. And so I've got to think about it. If he gets a free ride to college or some form of secondary education and my estate doesn't have to pay for it, he gets chunks of money that's divided up over the terms of the program, because he's got to keep that scholarship, right? But he gets chunks of money to do whatever he wants with. And I've got suggestions in there. Hey, you might want to think about, buying a piece of property near the school, and perhaps, getting some roommates and getting started. And, it's in the plan, right? It's written into my plan because I need to still encourage him. And there's other things in there to disincentivize him from doing things, right? If he should have addiction issues down the road, then there are things that make the plan much, much tighter and much more stringent. So there's less access. But that's what I need to think about, because I've got a 4-year-old and someone who's got 25, kids who are 25 and 30 and have families of their own. You already know who they are as people and what they've learned and what their aptitudes are to a certain extent. And so you can plan for them in that way and what their needs are. So everybody's plan is different. When you're interviewing someone or you're meeting with an attorney, you want to make sure they're asking you questions to understand what you need, not what the general public needs, but what you need, so that you're getting a plan that's really customized to your family.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of great nuggets over here. And one thing that is apparent is that it's not one size that fits all, because depending on where you are in your life journey, depending on what your life goals are, it's going to be different. And that is a lot of information to have on your side for proper estate planning. So, what is it one thing that our audience could do today to secure their family?
Hmm. I go back to education all the time,
Hmm.
right? The very first piece is you got to know what you're up against. And for most people, they don't even have an understanding of what the process is. They just kind of assume, right? A lot of times people assume that, oh, when I die, my family will just get my assets. And you go, okay, well, how? How does that happen? And they're like, I don't know. They just get them. And it's like, well, yes, kind of. But there's this whole court process of changing titles. So having a keen understanding of how the process works in your own state is going to be really important, because then you know what you're at least up against and you're making an informed decision. If you still choose not to do estate planning at that point, at least you know what you've chosen. For most people, they don't know the perils and things that they're facing, and so they're not making informed decisions. And I would say the very first thing someone can do for their family right now is to learn about what the rules are in their state so that they know what they're up against.
Yeah, definitely. And I think so. We have just scratched the surface today, and yet we have shared a lot of information with the audience that if you know of someone who may be looking to do real estate planning or just educating your friends, and you can share it out. So it's also educating yourself and educating your family and friends, because the more everybody's on the same page, it gets easier to make an informed decision, because then you're all moving towards the same direction. So nowadays is a trend where youngsters and women and people from all different ages are jumping into businesses. So let's say if somebody's an entrepreneur, what are some of the key things that people can do to protect their business and personal credit?
Yeah, so business, right? When we're in business, there are certain things that we're going to need. You're going to want a proper corporate structure for whatever you're doing. If it's a partnership, you're going to want partnership agreements. If you have an LLC, then you want to make sure that you've got all of your ducks in a row. S corp, C corp, etc. You want to make sure that you have a corporate structure in place. One, because if you were to ever be sued in your business, you don't want your personal assets also being at risk. You don't want someone to be able to take your house in a judgment, right? In a lawsuit with your business. And so
Mhm.
having those two things be separate is really important and impactful. Now, keeping them separate is also important. So in separation of your finances, you need separate bank accounts, you need a separate EIN for your business. You've got to run your business like a business. And oftentimes I see people who are entrepreneurs, particularly new in their space, who put the legal aspect sort of on the back end, right? They're like, we're not making any money yet, so we can't invest in doing these things. Once we make a little bit of money, then we'll do it. But the legal part is really a part of your formation of your business. And so before you get started, before you go out there and pitch that first client, before you do these things, you want to make sure that you have your contracts in place, that your structure is in place, that you are clear on it. And before you go into business with your friends, because this happens often, and form a general partnership by default, you want to make sure that you know how you're going to get out of that partnership. If you're in business with people, how do you get out of it? What happens if one of them embezzles from the company? Or what happens if one of them becomes incapacitated? We just had COVID-19. A million people have died in this pandemic, right? In the United States. And so what happens if one of your partners passes away and now you're in business with their minor kids because they've inherited their interest? You have to have a plan. So a buy-sell agreement is important. In protecting your personal credit, you should build your corporate credit and use that when you're leveraging lines of credit for your business. If you're using your personal credit, then you're personally on the hook for business expenses, and that's not the best way to do it. Let's keep them separate, right? Same with the banking, same with everything else. We want to keep our personal on one hand and the business on the other. And that's where having the EIN comes in. That's where setting up and building business credit comes in. The more you build your business credit, the more access to lines of credit that you will have to be able to supplement your business.
Mm-hmm. Very powerful. So, what would you say are three legal documents that everyone should have, regardless of their age, health, or wealth?
Yeah. So those three legal documents are going to be your power of attorney for property. They're going to be your healthcare documents, the healthcare directives that we talked about. And it's going to be your distribution plan. The reality is none of us are getting out of here alive, right? Unless you've got the fountain of youth over there, which you look like you do. Can you please share? But really, it's not a matter of if we're going to pass away. It's a matter of when. And when we think about the when, we know that it's coming. Some of us are going to be fortunate enough to live very, very long lives, but old age is not something that happens for most, right? It's a privilege that's only given to a small few. And so your distribution plan is important. What happens with everything that you leave behind? The people that you love, the things, the stuff. For most people, they leave a mess, right? They leave a court mess that ends up with family fighting and all sorts of drama. I'm sure, many of the listeners and viewers here have at least one story, right? Where someone passed away and there was a fight and now people do not talk anymore. And it is a story as old as time, right? It's so common. Having your property power of attorney, having your healthcare directives, and having your distribution plan can protect your family.
Yeah, no, that is very, very helpful. And Portia, you have been so open with the knowledge that I'm very thankful for that, because it's important that we educate people. And that's the reason I do what I do. Bring on experts like you so that people can live a happy life and happy, healthy, and wealthy life.
Absolutely.
And retain their assets. So how can people connect with you, share your website, and share anything that's personal or that you would like our listeners to know so that they can get to know you a little bit more and connect with you?
Absolutely. So we are available on woodlegalgroup.com. We're Wood Legal Group on Instagram. We have a Clubhouse club room called the Black Trust Fund Kids. We also have a TikTok, which is so embarrassing. But, meet the people where they are is what they say. And getting people educated is really our main goal. And so we've got edutainment TikToks on TikTok. But you can connect with us anywhere there. We have educational webinars every month in our office. And so if people go to our website, we have one specifically for people with minor children because the considerations are just so different than general estate planning. And then we have one that's general estate planning. And so, people can come in, they can get the information, connect with us there. Most people don't know unless they go to our website, but my mother and I are actually partners in this law firm together. And so we are a female-owned and operated multi-generational law firm focused on intergenerational wealth. So it's kind of a fun family business for us as well.
Well, that's awesome. And listeners, you have heard Portia definitely share a wealth of information here to increase your wealth. So reach out and get the resources. So thank you, Portia. Really appreciate your time and your information and wealth of knowledge that you have shared with us. And thank you, listeners, for joining us, because without you, the show would not be possible. Reach out to us anytime with any questions, any information, any stories that we need to bring for you so that you can live a more joyous life, a more happier and healthier life. We are here to serve and support you. And also, thank you, Juan, for the technical support and making this show possible. And be well and take care until next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.